Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to our webinar for today. Our webinar today is Empowering Marketers to Work Smarter using AI technologies. This has definitely been a topic with a lot of interest. We've had a lot of registrants. It's not surprisingly, I think 79% of marketers think that AI tech is going to influence the future of marketing. So it's a really hot topic at the moment. So I'm just going to introduce you to our panelists. We have with us today, we have Tav who was the Senior Global Demand Generation Manager at Drift. And we also have Megan, who is the Senior Email Developer at Sinch. And my name is Ailsa Bates, and I'm the Director of Content and Brand at Exclaimer. And we make email signature management software and help people to make their email signatures really consistent and also to use them as an extra marketing channel. So let's just kick off for today. Tav, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Ailsa had mentioned, my name is Tav Dattolo, and I am the Senior Global Demand Generation Manager at Drift.
Oh, we just lose him?
I think we just did. Hopefully he will rejoin us imminently.
No problem.
There we go.
Technical difficulties. Started. So I'm going to dive right in and talk a little bit about AI as a whole. So first and foremost, we've all seen the tabloids. The AI revolution is here and it's here to stay, or AI is going to take our jobs, or there's going to be some sort of winners and losers on who adopts AI and who does not. So things like Bloomberg, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fortune, everybody has some sort of prediction around AI right now. But tabloids aside, we're witnessing some sort of fundamental shift in the way that we're going to be working in the future. So that's going to look like, do I think AI is going to take our jobs? Absolutely not. Do I think learning how to leverage AI in your day-to-day job is going to be imperative? Absolutely. I would say that with a resounding yes. In fact, McKinsey indicates that players that invest in AI are going to see a revenue uplift of 3 to 15%. And a sales ROI uplift of 10 to 20%. So a lot of big changes that are coming up. Additionally, Gartner has stated that 84% of digital marketing leaders believe using AI and machine learning enhances the marketing function's ability to deliver real-time personalized experiences to your customers. And that's all something that's top of mind for everybody right now, is delivering those personalized experiences that stand out above all else. However, before I go kind of down the AI rabbit hole, I think one of the big things that a lot of people struggle with is the different kinds of AI. So I was going to go through and indicate the overall meaning of AI, as well as 4 common types of AI. First and foremost, artificial intelligence is pretty much just what it sounds like, the practice of getting machines to mimic human intelligence to perform tasks. However, there are 4 really common types of AI that I'm going to go through here. But first and foremost, it's going to be machine learning. Machine learning is algorithms that recognize and make predictions based on patterns, relationships, and trends without having to be programmed. An example about training it to identify animals, or common examples of machine learning, are predictive analytics, facial recognition. So think about like when you go to the airport and they have those facial recognition software so that you can check in and go to your flight. Or streaming service recommendations like Netflix or Hulu, when it knows that based on the popular things that you've been watching, it's suggesting new and new things that you're probably going to enjoy. The next one's going to be generative AI. Generative AI enables users to quickly generate new content based on a variety of inputs. So I'm sure Ailsa has tested this out, being head of content over at Exclaimer. But it also uses inputs and outputs to these models, which can include text, images, sounds, animations, 3D models, or even types of data. But some tools that you may be familiar with that you may not even know that you're utilizing are ChatGPT, DALL-E, Jasper, Writer, or Google's Bard are all common types of generative AI. Next up is going to be natural language processing. The super obvious example of this is chat AI, like what Drift offers, where I work. Drift has a conversational AI tool that is a model trained off of thousands and thousands of conversations, their questions and responses, to constantly get better at understanding and responding to human conversations. So it sounds very organic and natural for those that are talking with that chat. Some real world examples of these are sentimental analysis, predictive text and language translation. And then the last one is going to be conversational AI. Conversational AI is the type of artificial intelligence that can simulate human conversations. It's made possible by natural language processing, like I had mentioned above, a field of AI that allows computers to understand and process human language. Some real world examples of this are going to be chatbots, virtual assistants, or your friend Siri and Alexa that's sitting in your pocket. Next up, I wanted to go through what does the future of AI look like in marketing and sales. So a couple big predictions that are common across the industry right now is going to be hyper-personalized marketing experiences at scale. AI has the ability to deliver those personalized experiences for people and allows you to do it on a much quicker scale. So being able to generate a personalized email based on a couple things that you know about somebody. Say they have a dog named Sammy, and you're able to correlate that directly into a generative AI tool like I had mentioned before. You're able to draft up that personalized email in 2 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Obviously, with some sort of human input, you're able to do that. Next up is going to be augmented sales intelligence, which is basically going to be AI-driven sales intelligence platforms that leverage natural language processing to analyze sales conversations and provide actionable recommendations to improve sales effectiveness. So a couple tools that I would shout out on this would be Gong. Gong is a natural language processing tool that's able to pick up on different conversational sentiments that you're able to pick out and jump exactly to that point in the conversation to better understand and help close more deals. And then the last one is going to be around ethical and responsible AI practices. There's actually a global seminar that they went to where Google, ChatGPT or OpenAI, as well as Microsoft, all are partnering together to adopt ethical and responsible AI practices, such as putting in watermarks when that's used for public usage. But it's going to be a big part of the future of AI. As this is something new, there isn't a ton of legal things that are around it, but it's going to be really important moving forward for those that are going to be taking advantage of AI. But that's everything on my end.
Thanks very much, Tav. That was really, really interesting. Hopefully we can go into some of those topics in a little bit more detail in the next 40 minutes or so. One of the things that I just wanted to tap into straight away is I think sometimes there's a bit of a gray area between what many of us might class as automation and AI. I just wondered if we could talk about the sort of differences between something that's actually we would classify as AI. It's actually got intelligence there. It's, you know, it's learning, and a system that's actually just an automation. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about the two, automation is oftentimes going to be something that you can configure on the back end. You basically give it the commands, and it's a lot of just if-then statements, which is saying, hey, if something happens, let's say like a traditional lead flows, if somebody downloads a piece of content, then push this email to a sales rep. So that's a traditional automation that you're going to see. Whereas generative AI is going to be able to think in real time based on the inputs and be able to spit out outputs based on the inputs that are put into it. So it's less if then and more so reading the sentiment of whatever it is and then spitting out to match whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good definition there. So we've all been hearing a lot about how creative AI is becoming, and I think we've probably all tried ChatGPT and asked it to write us a song or something like that. Do you think this is something that's we really need to worry about, and that to that point you mentioned in your presentation there, Tav, something that actually is going to steal all our jobs in the future? There's going to be no room for creative marketers in the future. How worried do we think we need to be about that?
Yeah, so I had kind of kicked it off as like tabloids are using that as almost like a scare tactic, and I think it's a lot of just, hey, like this thing is happening right now. There is an AI revolution. Kind of get on the bus or get left behind. It's less about okay, AI is going to take my job. I'm not going to be able to do or catch up with AI. AI always needs a human on the other end of it. I'm a firm believer in that. However, it is amazing for getting yourself 75% of the way on an idea that you're looking to create. But there's always going to be some sort of human input that's going to be had to take it that extra 25% to make it something tremendous with the human touch to it. But like I said, I think that you're going to need to learn, familiarize yourself with these different tools that are available now, because I think efficiency is going to go up. I think that people are going to be able to do things faster. And if you're not able to adopt these tools in order to get yourself to that 75% in that 15 minutes instead of 2 hours that it took you to write a webinar abstract or whatever it be, that's going to be huge. And the adoption of those different tools and learning the skills needed for that is going to be imperative for people as they apply to new jobs, as they continue in their existing jobs. So it'll be really important.
Yeah, no, I would probably second that. I think my experience as somebody with a content specialism is that we're looking at content generation tools right now, and my experience is that it really does take someone who knows what they're doing at the other side of that tool. It really is a tool, and without that knowledge in place, it's actually quite hard to get a good result out of the tool. You need to prompt it in the right way. You need to iterate with the tool in order to get something out of it which is actually working. So I think those inherent marketing skills that we all have are actually vitally important to use an AI tool in the right way and actually get a useful output out of it. And Megan, what's your view of that? I know you've got some views around sort of AI being used to do code that sort of play to that as well.
Yeah, so for me in email development, you kind of flip those numbers around a little bit. It takes me longer to leverage AI at this point to create good, solid email code than it does for me just to have the email coded myself and out the door. So email development is an incredibly specialized niche field, and AI tools like ChatGPT don't know all the little like quirks of email and hacks that you need to put in to get your email looking good everywhere, because in email we have over 15,000 renders that we can deal with, and there are all sorts of different fixes and tricks that we need to put into our code to make sure that it looks good everywhere, our code is efficient and not bloated and all that jazz, that it's accessible so that people of all abilities can read the email no matter where they are. And something like ChatGPT just can't get us there at this point. I always like to cite that my friends at Action Rocket, who are a great email marketing firm in the UK, did an experiment with one of their newsletters, coding things up with ChatGPT. And it took them more time to get the email working and looking okay enough everywhere than it would have if they just created the email themselves. So you definitely will run into more trouble on the technical side of things right now, relying on these AI systems, than you would if you just learned the knowledge and did it yourself. And I think in the next couple of years that could be either we can consider it growing pains until AI gets better, or a more long-term issue. We're waiting to see what happens. But that could become an issue on the coding side of things, from that accessibility level, brand trust level, cybersecurity space. So we need to just be really careful about what angle we come at this with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think ChatGPT is a really good case in point as well, where it's such a broad sort of tool that it doesn't really know the specifics. Like, I think this is a point you were making recently, Tav, about, it can go right from writing a song right through to writing email code. Well, that's a really broad sort of range of skills that it's trying to adopt there. And is it the case that probably in the future we'll actually need much more specific AI tools to do specific tasks, and that might be where this technology is going to go, and that might, to your point, Megan, be more helpful in terms of actually getting accurate code out of the back of it. You also made an interesting point, Megan, about the sort of security aspect of AI, which I think is a really, really interesting question as well. And again, ChatGPT is a case in point. I know there have been a few news stories about the fact that the information you put into that system is actually being used to train it, so it can come back out when someone else puts in a question. Have either of you got any thoughts about that? Any information?
Yeah, I would say like the security of things is going to be huge. And I think that's where you're starting to see like these one-off niche tools popping up, where like it's more stored in some sort of SaaS platform, where it's bundled up together, it's protected legally instead of it being an open language model that is then learning from the information that you're putting in there. So ChatGPT is pretty public, so it's great for making up a poem for your friend, but it's not always the best for your individual business use cases. So like a good example of this would be like Jasper. Jasper is a phenomenal AI generative tool for content writing, but they are protected, but also like a part of the GPT algorithm that at that point. So it helps. They're able to put together a tone of voice for you, so it's unique to your brand, which is really great. And I sound like a rep selling Jasper right now, but just a really cool tool that's able to kind of protect your proprietary data. One of the recommendations that I have is like if you're looking to delve into these different tools, make sure that you set up a council of some sort. And that it could be somebody from your legal team, your IT team, somebody from marketing, somebody from sales, and ethical practices and ways that you're going to kind of utilize these tools. Just like any other software evaluation that you're going to go into, you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to have security concerns instead of people going rogue and going directly into ChatGPT to write your next email. It's important to have guidelines in place, safe tools that you're going to be leveraging, and going through some sort of collective group of people that's able to audit those things is going to be a big part of a lot of companies in the future. And you can see that happening more and more, where there's going to be a small community of people that oversee kind of that different information.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I think that would be good advice for any company looking to implement these kind of technologies. And definitely, to my mind, I feel like that the purchased product is probably going to be the better way to go for that very reason. At least it's proprietary. Anything you put into that system is private to you. Certainly the generative tools that I'm looking at, they all fall into that bracket. And yeah, no, I hear you talking about Jasper. Other tools are available. We're also looking at Writer. So yeah, no, I think those kind of tools to me feel like a safer play, particularly if you're in a business which wants to protect its brand, which wants to have a good reputation out there, and not have its proprietary information just in a public tool. And I think that definitely for ChatGPT, that's what gives me pause, alongside the factor of how accurate the information is that it's pushing out to you, which again, I think plays to Megan's point about if you don't have that knowledge and understanding of what the tool is showing you, it's really, really hard to assess whether the tool is actually doing a good job for you. So that skill set that we all hold is still of vital importance, just to assess the value of the thing that the tool is generating for you. Is it worth us just playing into the conversational AI a little bit there, Tav? I know that's obviously an area of big expertise for you. And again, I know a lot of companies are looking at that side of things and are looking at those sort of AI conversational chatbots, etc. Is it worth just going through a few details on that for a minute and giving some advice?
Yeah, I think like going through that different process is going to be really, really important. Like you're going to see a whole new wave of technologies rising to the market over these next couple months of years, that are going to be specialized. Like Megan had said, ChatGPT isn't great with coding an email, but there may be a tool in the next couple of years that takes into account all of those different inputs or hacks that she had mentioned, that's able to kind of recognize the different things that you're looking to do. Different things like conversational AI, or generative AI are going to be a lot more prevalent. Things like being able to reduce the amount of work that it takes to produce different things. So that could be coming up with SDR replies within a conversational marketing bot. So say you're having an active conversation. So instead of that reply taking 5 minutes for the SDR to write, it's only going to take 30 seconds with a little bit of input and editing.
Mm.
Natural language processing. So that's another thing that conversational AI is going to be able to support. And that's going to be language translation, which is great because it reduces the borders in order to communicate with others. So say I am somebody that is sitting in North America that speaks English, but then somebody from a Chinese brand is chatting in with me. They only speak Chinese. They do not speak English. I can write back to them in English, hit the language translation button, and it's going to spit it out into Chinise. Which is great. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to nail it because I think there's some technical jargon that it's going to have to pick up on and learn from. But I think we're just going to only see these tools get better and better over time because they are learning from themselves in terms of their different language models.
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. That sounds like sort of science fiction stuff, doesn't it? But obviously it's the real world these days. I think it's interesting that you were talking about the system learning, because that's also an experience that I've had, is that for one of these tools to work, particularly if you're buying a proprietary tool, you actually have to teach it. So that point about teaching a generative tool to speak in your tone of voice, that's like there's a process that has to be gone to, almost like a human employee, where you have to train it. You have to train it to learn your brand tone of voice in order for it to be able to do that edit pass on the copy that it generates, or that someone else has generated, which I think for somebody in the sort of content world is hugely interesting. The idea that you can use a tool like that, train it to speak in your tone of voice, and then use that, you know, across the entire business as an editor, almost like a scaled up human editor that can re-edit copy into a tone that you want it to have, which from a branding point of view, a marketing point of view, is just a massive advantage if it works. But of course, it's the humans who need to help to teach the tool to do that. So it's still not a magic bullet. I think, you know, I think a lot of times when people talk about AI, it's like they think it's like a magic wand or something, you know, but it really, really isn't. It's still a tool, and it needs those people to either to train it or to use it, to your point, Tav, of making sure that once you've got to 70%, somebody is still taking that final step to make it really good at the end of the day.
I love that you had mentioned that, because we were going through a rough, or not like I can't even think of the word right now. A transitional period where we were kind of testing Jasper, and we were looking to train the tone of voice function. And I actually had our copywriter doing it. And I had mentioned, by no way, shape, or form is this going to be taking your job. If anything, that you're going to make this a lot easier. And the stuff that you're going to get down the road is going to be a lot closer to what you're looking for. And she was the one that had already built all that stuff out. She knows the exact tone of voice of our brand, which Drift is a little bit unique. It's a little quirky in the way that we talk. So training that is a little bit more difficult. But it's really nice because that's like that job opportunity for you in the future, is being a copywriter and being able to train a language model so that employees can produce better content, different things moving forward, and a lot faster, rather than taking the long process of doing that naturally.
Do you think there are any dangers of that? I know that something we've discussed before is what happens at the lower end of that scale of people coming into the marketing industry, those juniors who are coming in, and maybe they're starting using an AI tool. Do we think there's a danger there that people aren't going to learn the basics of their craft, and that in the long run that might actually be a detriment? Megan, I don't know. I think you maybe had some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to this yet. It's something I'm definitely thinking of. It makes me think of, you know, the probably at this point mid-level heading into senior level web developers that we have in the industry now, who came into web development by the way of using frameworks like Bootstrap, who can build Bootstrap websites. But if you ask them to try to do it from the ground up, they may not have no idea how to do it. So we ended up with all these websites across, you know, the internet that all look exactly the same, because everyone's using Bootstrap and no one learned how to do the craft correctly. And right now I can see with people using different types of generative AI that a lot of the language currently sounds the same. And even beyond generative AI, when we talk about just like algorithms, you know, look at how people change how they speak when LinkedIn decides to make a change in their algorithm. Everybody starts with one sentence with a bunch of space underneath it. and it's a hook to get your attention. I don't speak like that on LinkedIn, and it definitely like shows them like my quote unquote engagement, but I also am the type of person who's like, I'm going to rage against the algorithm because it's just how I am. And I believe in authenticity. And I truly think in the long term, like authenticity will always win out. But yeah, to really bring it back a little bit, it's a very big question on how do we start training up juniors to take our jobs in 15 years? Who am I going to train up to take over developing emails if they're learning to do it via an AI? And suddenly, like the code that they're giving me may not be the best code for XYZ reason, and they don't, or something breaks in the email given to them by AI, and they don't understand why, because they don't understand the nuances. So the answer there might be some sort of like mentorship. I think that might become really like even more important in the connections with people in professional communities, is kind of thinking about it now is like where my brain goes. I always think that sort of thing is really important, but it is a much, much larger question that we're going to have to face and figure it out, across all of the knowledge industries as AI becomes bigger, because we know it will. So, these are all the big questions, and it's just the start of the big questions that we need to think about.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Megan. Like, I think like there's always going to be a need for the fundamental skills at the base level. Like, you are only as good as your fundamental skills. AI can get you so far, but if you don't know how to write, or you don't know how to craft a sales email or a sales pitch or code an email like on the back end without it, what happens if that was to disappear overnight?
Right.
Like, it no longer exists. Say like the US government or whatever government decides that they're going to ban it, then you don't have it anymore. There's a lot of people left without those fundamental skills, and they're just spinning their wheels and they're not able to do anything then at that point. So I think it's important that we do teach the fundamentals at that junior level in order to be successful with this moving forward.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and I think it's interesting you say you can sort of recognize a style in especially things that come out of ChatGPT. I think you can see a style.
You can usually tell when something's been AI generated in language, and if somebody's using DALL-E, the art enters this weird like uncanny valley where like you're like, oh, this is a beautiful piece of art, but then it just feels like just a little bit off than if a human created it. And I think that's gonna separate people in the end, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. So what do you think we'd say to people who maybe are really averse to AI and don't take it on board? Do we think they're going to get left behind? Is it to that point you were making earlier, Tav? Is this something that we've all got to take notice of? We can't just avoid it, even if we have concerns about it. Is it something that we just have to get on board with, or we're just going to get left behind?
I think like for most industries, I don't think all industries, but for most industries, like it's going to be important to have some sort of fundamental knowledge of like how these tools work, purely from an efficiency standpoint of like how fast, like we're all like, and I hate this coined term of do more with less. Like we're all strapped right now. Like we all don't have the teams that we used to. Funding has dried up across the SaaS industry. Like there's not as many hires going out there. So being efficient in the way that you're doing your work is everything right now. And that is the number one thing that it can help you with for a lot of use cases. It may not be for coding right now, but it is for writing a new blog or coming up with like a new product pitch. But there is always that layer of I need to be good at those fundamentals. Like we had just going back to the last thing that we had said, that last 25, 30% of empathy, being able to like resonate with your audience, making it not sound like generative AI, that we're going to need to be able to put in there. That's also going to be really important because that's going to be the differentiator between us being replaced and us being on top of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Just moving on to a slightly different topic, what do we think are the ethical concerns with AI? I think we've probably all heard about the way that AI can actually have biases introduced into the systems just by the people who code it, and certainly that's something that I feels really concerning to me. What are the group's thoughts about that?
I think it's an incredibly important thing to think about. Yeah, there are no biases, or there are. Sorry, my words got mixed up in my head. No algorithms or machine learning languages, anything humans create, nothing is unbiased. We bring all of our life experiences into whatever we create. So the teams who are working on these systems need to make sure that their teams are diverse, keep hiring those diverse teams to bring in different viewpoints. Make sure you are consulting with people of different viewpoints, cultures, backgrounds, religions, across the whole board. Because I can tell you with algorithms as they stand right now, like there are interests that I have that the algorithms pick up on. And those interests are almost like gateways into some really bad corners of the internet, because the algorithm assumes that I am then interested in like just these other things that happen, that I happen to like have like that little thing in common. And I'm just like, how did I get here? I don't want this content. The social media stuff also thrives off of like putting really inflammatory things in front of people. But that's all built by people. That's not by accident. That's people doing that and working on the algorithm. So you just need to think about, and if you are a person who does work on AI and these sorts of algorithms, I think it's important to look inward and be like, what am I working on and what am I putting out into the world? And is it helping or is it hurting? And again, I feel like I keep posing these big questions that I don't have the answers to, but those are the things that we just need to be thinking about it. And we've seen it throughout history too, when we've had these new technologies come in, of who do they help and who do they hurt? And there's just so much out there where different products are tested. They're only tested with one kind of type of person. No one else is taken into consideration, and other people inadvertently get hurt, or maybe they're not hurt, but it's just frustrating. And who wants to be frustrated by just trying to live your everyday life? So I always bring it back to, how can we make sure we're helping as many people as possible?
Yeah, and I think particularly if you're a marketer, it's really important to consider these things, because whatever tools you're using and whatever output you get from those, in some sense, that's going to represent your brand, especially if you're using that material. So it's really, really important that you're checking whatever tools you are using and making sure that you aren't accidentally putting something out there which actually you wouldn't want to represent your brand, and you just haven't realized because of your own biases, perhaps. So yeah, I think those are really important considerations. And it's interesting you mentioned social media, Megan, because I think in some ways those algorithms that we're all sort of very very used to, they're probably most people's biggest experience of AI in a way.
For sure.
Of that content. They're very intelligent, but it's interesting how much those have affected the world. So when we're looking at AI tools for use in our own marketing, we've really got to consider these things, how powerful these tools can be as well, because they are self-learning, and how quickly they can develop. So I think as a marketer, you've always got to be checking back on what you've chosen to use and what it's generating, and making sure that you are still producing information that's accurate, perhaps if you're in my kind of world, or to Megan's point, that you actually do have the ability to check the code, that kind of thing, that you aren't accidentally putting something out there just because it's quick and efficient and easy and you're saving time, that you aren't kind of skipping a few steps and not going back and really, really making sure that you understand what's going out there in your company's name. So what about AI and plagiarism? I think we've all heard quite a few things about that topic as well. We've heard about ChatGPT again being probably the most familiar instances of that. I mean, to me, that makes perfect sense. I think as a content person, we're always thoroughly checking our sources, especially when we're generating all of that research ourselves. And certainly the way we use AI tools is we brief them, so we try and give them that information and do as much of the research we can ourselves. But yeah, I think there's a massive danger if you're using an open public tool which is sourcing its information from who knows where, and you're relying on that. And again, I think that can really undermine a brand's reputation, and just in a heartbeat. And I think, again, as a marketer, that's to me where the danger lies. It's not to me about the loss of jobs. It's about reputation and the value of your brand and how much you can impact that by just almost trying to shortcut something. So I think we've really got to be careful about that. I don't know whether you guys have got any great examples on that topic as well.
I don't have any exact examples. I mean, as from the way I'm speaking, you probably won't be surprised that when it comes to generative AI, I come down on the side of leaning away from something like DALL-E especially for images, because I am a very pro artist, I guess is the best way to put it. And having worked with artists in the past, I believe that they should be paid what they're worth for their work. And I have artist friends who have found out that their work without their permission has been fed into algorithms to start training these systems. So you can, say, put in art prompt, and I'm just going to use this as an example, but say you put in starry sky, Van Gogh, maybe you're not going to get his version, starry sky, but you will get a version in his style. And imagine if people started doing that with contemporary artists who have spent years upon years honing their craft and deserve to be paid for their work. And you're a brand who maybe tries to emulate a popular artist's art style, and people find out that that's not their art and you didn't pay them. That's probably going to make people angry, and it's going to erode your trust. So you have to be really careful with things like that for sure. And I always err on the side of hire a graphic designer or commission your art, pay those people what they're worth, because they know for the most, well, I don't want to say for the most part, but those are the experts. They know what they're doing. They, deserve to live based on what they love to do, like many of us.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'm a huge respecter of design. Obviously, I think it's really important. The designers I know who have played around with AI tools give very similar feedback to my content people around AI tools, in the sense of it's actually quite useful to sort of get something going. It's almost thinking you can use it like that. But again, it's that point of really it's only going to get you 70% of the way there. Right. And you need that skilled person to take it that full distance into something that's actually usable and workable and is on brand and is actually going to be useful to you in a marketing sense. So yeah. Have you got any thoughts about that, Tav?
Yeah, I think a completely separate example of this is when ChatGPT first hit the market. I think it was November, December last year. So many kids were using it to write their papers and develop all of their homework and do math problems and different things like that. Especially with e-learning being so prevalent still, nobody really knew what was going on. So I think that's a bit of a disruption in terms of learning the fundamentals. Going back to what we were talking about earlier of you have to learn that before you're able to utilize this in a way that you can intelligently inform it, so that you're not totally bypassing everything and using the easy button then at that point. So yeah, I would say definitely it makes sense that schools have cracked down on it. There is a level of plagiarism checkers that people are going to start labeling it as such, if you're not editing content in some capacity. So yeah, I think it's going to be important that stays the way that it is. And hopefully that council of people, like I had mentioned earlier with Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, is really going to take that into account moving forward to make sure that there isn't plagiarism, so there isn't people just falsely spreading information.
And what do you think the limits of AI in marketing are? I mean, some of the stuff you were talking about earlier, Tav, was really, really interesting. That cutting edge stuff, that kind of natural language processing, chatting in English and the person reading it in Chinese. Some of the other topics we've touched on. Where do you think the limits are? Do you think in the future we're going to see, for example, AI tools that will be doing that plagiarism check? Are we going to just see this universe expanding and expanding?
Yeah, and I think it's really similar to how software as a service developed. I would say 2005, 2008 is like when that first really started happening. I think it's going to be really similar to that. Probably not on the total scale of that, but I think we're going to see a lot of different tools and platforms that are able to do a lot of different things. But it's going to be not just marketing. It's going to be sales. It's going to be CS. It's going to be IT. It's going to be like code development and product. So I see the limits being pretty endless right now. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for it to continue to grow out. Like, some really cool things that I've dove into is like being able to fully customize a website based on the visitor, based on visitor intelligence. So something like, hey, this person works in the manufacturing industry. Their job title is a marketer. The website completely will rewrite itself in real time to suggest the right pieces of content, to speak the language of that individual that works in that industry based on like knowledge and different things like that. And then at that point, like, it's accompanying like the design of a designer and different things that you're able to incorporate so that it works more harmonious and we get better personalized experiences based on what we're looking for, instead of that generic experience, one size fits all for everybody kind of thing, which I think we've been going after that for a really long time, but in B2B marketing, we haven't been able to accomplish that. To an extent you can, but also at the same time, like, it's going to fast track it to be on pace with how B2C brands are able to customize their sites for you and the products that you're interested in and the suggested things like next up in your Amazon cart. So hopefully we can get closer to that and we waste less time searching for the information that we're looking for and we're able to be served in real time.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And that really is the hyper personalization, isn't it? The website rewriting in real time as you come to it. I just think it's absolutely fascinating. I'm assuming that, to me, that kind of the absolute extreme of that is it being like that at every point of the marketing mix, so that omni-channel, you know, really having it personalized at every touch point. I think that, to me, is the sort of place where it's properly personalized. How far away do you think that is in time? How is it? I mean, to me, that feels like we're years away from that. You know, I think that's sometimes the thing about AI. It's really fantastic, but at the same time, it's still limited in lots of ways. You know, so to me, I think sometimes we underestimate how far away those things are. What are your estimates on time for that? What you just described, Tav, for example?
Yeah, I think like you can do it right now to an extent, but like it's not built into a platform, which is going to be kind of the easier button that's able to do that. It's definitely something that takes a lot more manual work right now, whereas in the future it won't be as much manual work. So it's like training the model. It's like being able to speak in the language of different personas and different things like that. It would take a lot of manual time. And we even battled this at Drift. Like, when we first stood up our conversational AI tool, we did not have like suggested keywords for the different stuff. We actually have built that in now as a part of our GPT integration, which is really helpful for individuals. But at the first, like, it took hours and hours and hours to train a conversational AI bot, whereas now it's down to 20 minutes, which is great. So it's just going to be a matter of like when the technology advances to make it faster instead of doing the manual process then at that point.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there about it actually needs to be in a platform as well for it to be usable. It needs to be something you can buy and plug into your website for that really to really work perfectly.
The really interesting thing about when we talk about personalization too is how far will we as marketers be able to push something like personalization at that level and scale while not creeping people out? This made me think of this very old article I read. And when people talk about personalization, I love bringing this one up. I don't remember if it was an old Business Insider article or something like that, but it had to do with the company Target and how Target used to send out. And this was like before algorithms and all that. So, you know, all of our, you know, the way we talk about these things and we accept things have changed with retargeting over the internet and whatnot. But Target used to send out these really personalized booklets based on the things that were on your card that you bought. And people started getting like really creeped out. I remember there was one story where a teenage girl actually went to Target, bought some items, and then as a direct mailer, Target being super personalized, got a mailer congratulating her on her pregnancy, and her father found it. Went to her daughter, and ended up the daughter was indeed pregnant. And Target inferred all that based on things that she bought in the store. But what they found in the end is that they started changing the booklet a little bit, of having a lot of things to target you with, but also having a couple of unrelated items alongside of it, so that people didn't realize that they were being targeted so aggressively. And I can see that balance being needed, maybe not as much anymore, and that may go away even more in the future as we get more and more used to the algorithms and being retargeted across the internet. We all get followed by the different items and whatnot, but it is something that I always keep in the back of my mind when I'm trying to do any sort of hyper personalization.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I think sometimes it can go wrong. I mean, that's a classic example of, somebody, if you search on Amazon, for example, for, something for a baby because you're buying a present, it will then target you because it assumes you're about to have a baby, and that's kind of like a slight misunderstanding there. Yeah, and I do think it is a bit creepy. I think that retargeting can sometimes creep people out as well. And there is all of the other factors against personalization, that there's always the chance that the consumer rebels and turns off all their cookies and stops being tracked, etc., which can really impact that. Okay, we're actually coming to the end of our hour. It's been an absolutely fantastic conversation. We actually do have a question from one of our attendees. And if anyone else has any questions, I'm going to just throw it open to the floor now for the next 10 minutes. So our first question is: any insights or research on customer receptivity to AI content and messaging? Is it a turn-off, or do they not care? So we've sort of touched on this slightly. Do either of you want to say what you think about that?
Yeah, it definitely is going to take the human element. Like I'm going to go back to that of like, people can recognize when something is being generated through generative AI. And I think they're able to kind of read through it. There's like specific words that start popping up, or cues that kind of showcase that. So it's understanding that if I use this tool, then I need to edit this and make sure that it sounds like our brand. And like, and Ailsa, I think you mentioned this earlier, it could hurt your brand credibility if you don't take the time to do that. Yes. And it's going to be extremely important in order to do that. So I do have an example of how I've done that before. So I did a large virtual event called the Go-to-Market Lab a few months ago. And it was a week long. It was 5 different talk tracks. But in order to develop all of the different like abstracts, speaking kits, like different things, I actually used generative AI to do it, where it cut down a tremendous amount of time that it would have taken me to do all that by hand. We're down a team member, so I was the only one doing it. Probably would have taken me an entire week, like 40 hours. And it really only took me 20 hours then at that point to develop all that different stuff. But I was extremely cautious and meticulous. And I think there's another question in the chat about being anxious about it. I was anxious about it, but it was actually really well received. And I didn't have a single person call me out and say, hey, you used AI for this, or whatever it be. And I think it overall strengthens the success of our event. And we had over 2,000 people register and attend the event overall. So it was great to kind of see that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Megan, have you got any thoughts on that?
Not at the moment. I was looking at some of the other questions actually, because I saw John here. Sorry to kind of switch on you real quick, just because I see things about like being a copywriter and whatnot. Your job's not disappearing quite yet. You'll be okay. I mean, start learning some prompts. It can be good for brainstorming, but I think people just think their jobs are disappearing tomorrow, and they really, really aren't. They're not disappearing tomorrow. I just want to put that out there. They're not disappearing tomorrow at all.
I would totally agree with that. Yeah, the person who asked the question about being an anxious SEO and copywriter, you know, what's the advice on how to adapt? So yeah, I agree. We're definitely, your job's definitely not in any danger. Google actually is quite good at spotting just very sort of basic AI written content. So particularly for SEO, I think at the moment, I think you really do need a human. And we've actually actively tested that against a human written article and an SEO, an AI written article from ChatGPT, and Google knew which one was which surprised me because I thought they both read well. So definitely less, no need to be anxious. And I do think that where you start is just by playing with the tools. I think it's like getting on with any tool. There's another person who's asked for some good resources on writing more efficient prompts, and there are actually some good books on Amazon. If you just search on Amazon, you'll see quite a lot of books. I'm a book reader, so I tend to go to books, and there are quite a lot of good books about how to write prompts and that kind of thing. But my advice would actually be just to play with the tool. And quite a lot of the tools are free, so you can just play with them. And it's really interesting to put the copy that perhaps the tool's created back into it and say, rewrite this and prompt it to write it in a different way. And it's also really fun. And I think maybe that's something that maybe gets lost a little bit. But personally, I actually really enjoy that process of working with a tool like that and just trying to get it to output something that I like. And don't get me wrong, you know, I'm from the generation where we did everything from scratch and we'll start with a blank sheet of paper. You know, I'm an old school copywriter, but I'm actually enjoying the process. And to me, it feels like working with a useful junior rather than anything else. In my team, perhaps somebody who I'd be, you know, getting a draft and giving feedback to, and then doing that process again. And it feels like a very similar process working with an AI writing tool, where, yeah, it's not going to produce the right thing first of all, but you feedback and you iterate, and eventually it comes out with something decent. And to your point, Tav, you know, you only cut your time in half. You didn't completely. It wasn't just a magic button. You know, you still had to work really hard to get that content out. Okay, we've got another question here about the conversational tools. So Ken is asking, can you speak to the power of conversational tools, AI tools like PIAI.ai? What roles do you see this playing in a marketing department? I'm starting to use it to drive innovative conversation in a team setting.
That's a really interesting use case that you're kind of taking advantage of there. So conversational AI is going to be really, really big in terms of like being able to get the questions answered that you're needing. So it could be something as simple as like, I'm going to a website and I want to know all of the events that are going to be happening that this company is putting on. And it could be a simple prompt of like, show me the events like in a bot. And then it's able to kind of pull you directly to those individual pages instead of having to search for it from scratch. Additionally, this like conversational AI, like thinking of it more so in the realm of like ChatGPT. I'm actually not familiar with Pi.ai, but like using it as like a conversation back and forth to help you brainstorm new ideas. This could be coming up with like webinar prompts. It could be coming up with like, I have the initial idea, but I need to build it out even further. Giving it a structure of some sort. This could be like, I use a like creative brief to create some of the different things that I'm using, giving it, hey, put it in a format of X, Y, and Z. My idea is X. Can you give me the first draft of this? It's a great way to kind of get that fundamental start. Yeah. And I think it's going to jumpstart a lot of really cool ideas for people where they get stuck in that initial idea phase rather than like I have this idea, I've been thinking about it for 6 months, a year, whatever it is. This could get you that shortcut that could be good enough to then provide that proposal to your manager or somebody at the upper level of your organization. And it would be a lot more compelling to them than at that point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it can be really useful for ideas, actually. And we've got another question here. What free tools do we recommend experimenting with? I would probably also say that alongside, so obviously I'm probably going to reference generative tools, but the tools that you also pay for, usually you can get a free trial, and I'd actually recommend trying that because it can give you a real insight into the sort of range of tools out there. So obviously ChatGPT is free and is very, very well known. And we've also talked about Bard, which is Google's version. But I'd also recommend going and looking at tools like Writer and Jasper, where they're more sophisticated, and yeah, in the long run you might have to pay, but you can get a really good sense for how they work just by using their free trials and just playing around with them and just taking advantage of that 14 days or whatever you're going to get for free, and working out whether it's a good investment. I don't know whether anyone else has any recommendations for free tools.
I know there's a copywriting one. I don't know if it's free. Copy.ai. I've known people to use it and have for their personal newsletters and like using it to help them get started. I don't know if that's free or paid or if there's a trial. I have not used it. I've just heard good things about it.
We do pay for that, but it is very cheap, and we mainly use it for sort of brief writing. Actually, is one of the uses we have for that. But yeah, I think that is a good one as well. All right, we've got a couple of other questions here. We've got 5 minutes left. Let's see if we can get a couple more in. We see a lot of AI-generated content for websites, social media, email marketing, blog, etc. Will there be any penalties in near future for using a lot of AI-generated content for website? Well, that's why I mentioned that point about AI earlier, actually, because Google's algorithm has been updated really to address this issue, and Google is prioritizing content which is made by humans. And I think the algorithm update, you can probably find it on Google if you Google the human algorithm update. There's 6 different points on there, and they prioritize authors that they know are human. So in the past, I spent a lot of time taking author names off blog posts and that kind of thing, and now I'm putting them back in because Google prefers content that it knows is from an actual human source, from a writer that has a reputation, prefers journalistic style copy, that kind of thing. So I actually think Google's making real moves to make sure that it's not just listing lots of sites that have literally been just purely generated by AI with a sort of SEO keyword AI strategy in there. So yeah, I think you've got to be really careful with your website content, particularly if you are really, really trying to do an active SEO strategy, which we are. We're very, very careful around that. Anyone else got any thoughts about that?
No, I think definitely. I think you'll be penalized in the future if you're not doing that, like human element copywriting, which goes back to the 70-30 rule that I've been mentioning that this whole time. A couple other tools that I've come across recently that I've dabbled a little bit with is Tome, Tome. It is a presentation builder backed by generative AI, which is actually really interesting to me. It's a little bit better than Google Slides, in my opinion.
Sounds great.
Also, there's a really cool one around brand sentiment and analysis and like how you're being received in the market. It's called blueocean.ai. I took an initial call with them, took a look at it. It's a really interesting tool. I'm not sure about the price, but overall, just really interesting that it's able to kind of glean those insights and kind of inform you of what's going on with your brand in real time. Because a lot of times, like, you're not able to pick up brand awareness metrics. Like, you can only track the leads and the MQLs and different things that you're getting. So it's just another way of looking at things and being able to quantify the success of the things that you're doing in marketing.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I think all of us could do with help making presentations. I think I should look that up immediately after the call. It might also be worth saying to the people on the call, obviously there's a lot of questions here about can we give some suggestions for websites, for prompt writing and that kind of thing. I think what we'll do after this call, and there will be follow-up emails after this call, so do keep an eye on your email, and we will try and send you some useful resources. For example, we're producing a white paper on AI in marketing, which will be ready in the next few weeks. So if you keep an eye on your email, that will appear in your inbox, and we'll have lots of great information. And I'll also make sure that we add a few little suggestions into the emails that you'll be getting in the next week, just to answer some of these questions. So we've got a couple more. We've got maybe 2 minutes left. Which would you like to answer? We've got. Oh, can we say again the tool that we both mentioned from Ken? I wonder if you meant Tome. Ken, if you can.
Copy.ai might have been the one.
Oh, it might have been copy.ai. That's true. Yeah.
That's another one. And then there's Writer, there's Jasper.
Yeah.
Those would be the big generative AI content writing.
Yeah, no, that's true. Will AI revolution affect email deliverability, Megan?
Yeah, I was going to say, could I take that question real quick? Because that's sort of my email deliverability niche is like not my wheelhouse, but I know enough about it. Having to, having to do with send emails. So I'm like, ooh, an email deliverability question. Okay, so real quick, we got like 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
I think, so it depends. That's how I start every answer in email. It depends. If you are doing something like sending cold email and you're sending it out en masse, yes. I mean, by the fact that you're sending out cold email, your deliverability is going to be affected. But if you are sending out thoughtful campaigns, and if your copy is starting with AI and you are editing them, and we keep talking about that human touch, and you remain authentic to your brand, then you should be okay. If your audience is engaging, which is kind of like the crux of good deliverability, you want that audience engaging, you have the technical stuff down, DMARC, SBF, DCAM, all that jazz, you'll be okay. Just, keep up with your good marketing practices. If you have questions about good marketing practices, I'll just plug like the companies I work for real quick. Just check out Mailjet, Mailgun, Email and Acid. We have blog posts, webinars, all that stuff if you're worried about that sort of thing. But yeah, don't spam people. Send good email.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a really good point to make. I think probably overarching what we're saying here is that all those marketing skills that you already have still are like vitally important, and all of these other AI things that we've mentioned, all these different tools, they are that, to my mind, they're tools, and like any other tool, you could cut yourself with it. You need to be careful. You need to know how to wield that tool, but the human at the other end of it is still really important. Is there anything else we'd like to tie up with? Any other last comments from the panel?
No, this was so much fun. And thank you everybody for coming on.
No, I was trying to stop myself making notes about some of the things that you mentioned, Tav, as well. So I'm very aware that probably everyone on the call would love to get some of the details. So we will make sure we follow up with all of that. And thank you everyone for attending, and thanks to my other panelists as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, guys. Bye.